Hello, welcome to Seminary School. I'm Chris Silvius, your host, and we're going to be talking about the doctrine of creation in this particular class. And we're going to use the text Genesis chapter 1 through 3, everything that I'm going to say. I've read the Old Testament at least 20 times and the New Testament over 25 times. I've been reading the Bible since I was 18. I'm 33 now, so at least 15 years documented the Bible. And this notebook, which I'll use today, this notebook here, this one, and also this one. So we'll get through them by the time that we end this series. It'll be probably a long time from now, but we're going to start with Genesis chapter 1 through 3 and make our way through the entire Bible till we get to the end of the book of Revelation. Lesson 1. Let's begin. The doctrine of creation. The Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, the Bible says, when God created the earth. Okay, so there's just darkness, and there's like a ball of water. It says that the earth was void and, without form. And so a lot of people would interpret that to mean that there's like a gap in between Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and then verse 2. Because the Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth in verse 1, which is very interesting. We'll break that down in a minute. But in verse 2, it says, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. So they would interpret that to mean that it was like destroyed, because there's another place in the book of Jeremiah which prophesies of the earth being void and the darkness. It talks about how the birds of the air basically could not be found. So they're saying that that there was a destruction of like a world that existed before God created this world, and was like Satan and the angels ruling over it, and then there was like a flood of that world. So in between Genesis 1, where it creates the earth, the heaven and the earth, and then like billions of years of geologic time go by, to make all the layers and get the dinosaurs from the fossil record or whatever. That's kind of why they want to make up this theory, but they call it like a gap fact, but it's not even a good theory, okay? It's not even a good hypothesis, because nowhere in the Bibles that talk about this, Satan's flood or whatever. It has to be imagined. But anyways, without form and void does not necessarily mean destruction. You could look at it that way if you want. I could see how you could interpret it that way, but the Bible here in Jeremiah is talking about destruction, yes, but in Genesis it's talking about something being created. It doesn't mean it was destroyed. It just means it's not done yet. Okay, there isn't anything there. There's just darkness. There's a void, because the emptiness of space. So it says God is moving upon the face of the waters. So what I see is like God, just kind of hovering. It's a spirit. I believe he has a body. But he is hovering as a spirit. You have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and these three are one. They're two, bodies and one spirit, and they operate as one God. Now they're uh, together, moving over the spirit. The spirit of God is moving over the face of the water. So uh, this is just darkness, okay? Because not even light has come into being yet. When it says in the beginning, that is a reference to God's beginning, not our beginning, because God created time, space, and matter. And in that verse, Genesis chapter 1, it says, in the beginning, which is a reference to time, God created the heaven, which is a reference to space, and the earth, which is a reference to matter, time, space, and matter. And in each of those components, time, you have past, present, future. Space, you have height, width, depth, and matter. You have solid, liquid, gas. Trinity of Trinities, all right there in the first book of the Bible, which is the basic instructions for leaving Earth. And only God could write a book like that. Only God could speak everything into existence. Certainly didn't come from nothing, as the Big Bang Theory would suggest, that this dot exploded. No, that's not what happened. Okay, God spoke everything into existence. Uh, so God is moving over this ball of water, essentially. That's what's happening. I have to go skip to verse 3 and then go through verses 31. You see what God created on each day. First, he created the light and signified, he divided the light from the darkness. And then he signified a 24-hour time period by saying that the evening and the morning were the first day. So you have a 24-hour period of time. The word day, in particular, like in the Hebrew, is indicating just a regular day, because it could have used other forms of the word day, which don't mean a literal 24-hour period of time. Okay, there are other words in the Hebrew, but it uses the regular word for day. So no reason to believe it's talking about, and that's the other theory that people try to come up with, is that each day in Genesis represents, millions of years. So in order to compromise and fit in evolution theory with the Bible, even though the Bible clearly doesn't teach, that the earth is millions of years old, or that anything evolved, it says that God created the kinds that produce after their own kind, and that's all that we ever see. Some people still want to try to compromise, try to fit evolution theory into the Bible, and say, that when God created each day is just a typology, it's just a symbol of millions of years. And so, yes, the ancients were supposed to take it literal, but then that literalness would come to, an understanding of people in the future that have modern science. They would take it typologically. And so it's all just symbolism to them. And each day represents millions of years, but there are serious problems, with that. I'll give you, everything with evolution theory is just completely backwards to the Bible. So I think they're making a major mistake if you're going to try to compromise. We won't get off too far on that, but light is what God makes on the first day. On the second day, he creates the firmament. So he creates the Earth's atmosphere, essentially, is what he does. He caps it off with probably a canopy of super cold ice or metallic hydrogen, and suspends it with the Meissner effect with gravity above the Earth. Maybe that and like air pressure alone could hold it up there, it rotating and being in super cold, outer space. That would essentially keep it from melting, because it's not stationary and it's in a cold environment. But the point is, you don't have to concede to that. It's just that God does create the Earth's atmosphere. This is what he's doing on day 2. He's separating, 2 bodies of water. So you have all the water that is already there, that big ball, which he was hovering over before he divided the light from the darkness. He was hovering there. There was just a ball of water. So now there's light and there's darkness. and then he's going to take that body of water and break it into two. So it's going to create a bubble outside of that body of water, and then that's going to be the atmosphere. Some believe, that dome is still there, and that we haven't even been outside of the firmament, which suggests that there's no outer space, and they're called flat earthers, and I don't agree with them. I respect some of them, but don't agree with it. Anyways, I believe that canopy came down at the time of the flood, when the fountains of the great deep broke open, launched large chunks of the earth out into outer space. This would have the canopy would have entirely collapsed, and so it's no longer there, but the atmosphere is still there, which protects us from a lot of the harmful radiation of the sun. Now, on day 3, so on day 1, he creates the light. Day 2, creates the firmament, the atmosphere. Day 3, he creates the earth and the seas. So the land makes the land come out of this body of water, and all that water he puts within the land in subterranean chambers of water, which then escaped the earth at the time of the flood. So today, most of the earth's water is on the surface, whereas before the flood would have been under the crust of the earth. And so because the earth, it creates the granite crust. Won't get into all the how the earth is made of a core and a liquid. It's like a solid inner core, liquid outer core, mantle, which is Play-Doh, super hot rock, which is, not melted, but it's not solid either. And then you have a hard and rocky, brittle crust, which we're standing on. And so he creates the earth. And then under that hard and rocky, brittle crust, at the very top where we're standing on, before the flood, there would have been 60 miles, say, of granite. Okay. And then that is connected to the mantle beneath. And then in between the mantle and the crust will be all of the water. And so on day 4, he creates the sun, moon, and stars. Now, again, the flat earthers will say that the sun and the moon kind of rotate. There's the sun is kind of like a spotlight, and it goes around the earth. Okay? Now, what I believe is that God stopped moving over he's probably still moving over the face of the waters. I don't know. But the Bible teaches that there was evening and morning up until this point when the sun, that's how we get the evening and the morning. So God must have been, keeping track of time before the sun existed. He was, doing what the sun does, essentially providing light to the earth until he would put the sun there. But the evening and the morning is still a clear indication of a regular day, even with that. So he puts the sun in a stationary position, relatively, and then the moon, it's going to, as less gravity, it's going to start orbiting around the earth, because the sun has more gravity than the earth because of its highly condensed inner core. The sun is going to be stationary. The moon will be orbiting around the sun. All these processes are happening now because he's created the stars. So in that we have galaxies, clusters of galaxies with various solar systems all orbiting around supermassive black holes. So billions of galaxies now all over the world. And, in the Earth, in our solar system, you're just a type. We were the first solar system, if you will. And then God created the rest of them. So be proud of the fact that God cares about you. And so if you just surrender to the God of the universe, believe in Jesus Christ, he'll save you from eternal damnation. He's given you a choice, and that's the problem. A lot of people don't want to make the right choice, but it's a very easy choice, and it'll save you. It's you couldn't ask for anything more. If God just wanted to give you free will. So I know there's a lot of suffering, but if he is all knowing and he is all loving, well, if he could have done it any other way, he would have done it that way. But this is how it has to be done. You have to live a life on the earth, and you have to make the choice if you want to receive salvation as a free gift or you want to spend eternity in hell. Now, the choice is yours. Like it or lump it. Let's get back to the lesson here. Day 5. The fowls of the air and the creatures of the sea are formed. So everything that's living in the sea is formed, as well as the fowls of the air. So basically, God's going to create a bunch of birds, and they're going to come up out of the water and start flying in the air at this point. That's day 5. So day 6, you have the beasts and the creeping things of the earth, and the last creation was man and woman. Now, I believe when he creates the earth and the seas, that's when he creates the plants as well. So these days cannot represent millions of years, because the next day is the sun and the moon and the stars are going to come out. It's like, well, is the sun, if it's not coming out until the next day, and each day is millions of years or whatever, like eons of time. Well, if the plants are already there, and then they have to wait another day for the sun to come out, doesn't seem like there's like a problem. So I don't think that holds water, if you will. The day age theory or the gap theory, they're nonsense in my opinion. But day 6, you have the creation of the beasts of the earth, all the major mammals, and then you have the creeping things, all the insects, and then you have finally the final creation would be man. And then you have another final creation, which would be woman, maybe like a few days later or something. Now, God created man in his image. I believe that man is created in the image of God. So God is the image of man. Man is the image of God. That's not to say that we are God. God is the head. We are the body. He controls things. In no way am I saying that. But the Bible does say that he made us in his image. So, and the Bible talks about how the children of Israel, like certain of them were taken upon a mountain with Moses, and they saw the God of Israel. I believe they saw an appearance of Jesus Christ, in the Old Testament, because Jesus was with the Father before he became a man. And of course, he would remember that he was God at a certain point once he reached adulthood. I think the Bible actually puts it at like 12 years old where he remembered, But the point is that Jesus is appearing in the Old Testament. People are able to see him in the Old Testament, but they're not able to see the Father, because the Father actually puts his hand over a cliff of the rock and then moves it away so that Moses can get a glimpse of the back parts of God. And so that has to be talking about the Father. So what you see here is God, his image is a physical image. Legs, I'm talking about hands, I'm talking about ears, a nose, it's like it's a man. That's what God is. He's a man. That's why Jesus calls him Father. Just think about it. Okay, so that's what the image of God means. And I don't know, some would disagree with that, but I think that's what it means. Now, man and woman were created along with everything else God made from his image or imagination, if you will. God has an imagination, and the creation is the result of that. So God creates man and woman in his image. He created them as superior to all life on earth and in the seas, other than himself. He gave them dominion over everything. And they are pure and they are holy and they are supposed to just dominate the planet. So that's what they were commanded to do. They were put as rulers over the earth with God in ultimate control, and as ultimate authority to give them the rule, one job that they had, they couldn't do. But we'll get into that in a minute. God gave man the instruction to be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, and subdue it. God saw everything that he had made, and it was good, the Bible says. Now, some would teach, that theistic evolution, which is to say, that man is a recent creation, but everything else kind of like evolved. So I don't know about that though, because it seems to me that you're trying to put death before sin. If you're going to try to teach that, Adam and Eve are standing on billions of dead things, all this geologic eras that have passed millions of years as the fish evolve, into the primate over billions of years, and they're dying, and then their fossils are being preserved. Well, if they're standing on all this death, well, then how is God looking at it and saying that it was good? Within the context of Genesis 1, it's he made the world from scratch and he made it perfect, and then Adam and Eve were placed in it. So there's no reason to do all of these mental gymnastics to try to prove the gap theory, the age theory, etc. It's bogus. Everything God made was good. In the Bible, in the New Testament especially, it's very clear that death did not come until Adam sinned. So if you go to Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, you see that the seventh day is hallowed. So it's made holy. It's separated from the other days because on that day God rested, which would be then a symbol to the children of Israel to work 6 days and then rest the seventh. They weren't commanded to work 6 days and then take the rest of their life off, or to work 6 million years and then take 1 million years off. That's not what God wrote on a rock with his finger. He doesn't stutter. He said, in 6 days God made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested, and therefore he should work 6 days and rest on the seventh. And that would be called the Sabbath. Okay, this would be later called the Sabbath. And anybody who did not practice the Sabbath in the Old Testament, if you're living in Israel, doesn't mean that they enforced it, but it was in the law, that if you did not keep the Sabbath, you should be put to death. Now, a lot of Seventh-day Adventists out there trying to teach that we should, worship God, and that Old Testament, that the Sabbath should still be kept. Well, has it not changed? Like, is the punishment for not keeping the Sabbath, has that changed from the death penalty to something else? Because as far as I can tell, the Sabbath, it's specifically changed in the New Testament because it's part of the ceremonial laws, like the holidays and the dietary laws. You can't eat certain food, in the ceremonial laws with the priests and the temple and stuff. That has all been fulfilled in Jesus. It was all a symbol to be practiced at that time. Now it's been fulfilled. And then whatever hasn't been specifically changed in the New Testament, we still keep it. So if it's in the Old Testament and Jesus didn't say anything about it, and mentioned that it had been changed, well, then we're just going to assume that it's still in force, and stealing is still wrong. Killing people is still wrong. It should still, the death penalties should still follow killing someone. So if the Sabbath day is still something that we have to keep, well, then it looks like you believe the people that don't, that work on the Sabbath day, should be put to death. And that's unreasonable for the time that we live in now, and for, because God has scattered, his nation. He has replaced Israel with the church. That's why that's why you don't see Israel, as with 12 tribes and with the temple anymore. You see a very small remnant. I'll give you, over there right now in Palestine, and that's significant. They don't have a temple, and it's not, they couldn't trace their genealogy back 2,000 years to connect them with the actual priests. I don't even believe that's legitimate. But anyways, where were we? We were on the Sabbath. So God followed the Sabbath, this would mean that you, and I do believe in practicing though there is the principle of the Sabbath, which is to take a day off work and don't overwork your people. They need a day off, so that definitely should be like enforced, because dude, that's still wrong. To not give somebody a day off of work, I believe that is wrong. But and if you were to, yeah, I can see how God would think that would be worthy of death, and maybe they are that we should take a day off, but maybe a principle. But keeping a specific day of the week, I don't think is biblical, because they're working with a lunar calendar in the Old Testament, not like a solar calendar. So I'm pretty sure that we're not obligated to keep the Sabbath, but I'm also sure that we are obligated to give our servants a day off. Not that we have servants anymore, but that's, people, if bosses, they should give their people a day off work. Now, Genesis chapter 2, verses 4 through 17, we see the material that God used to create man, which was the dust of the earth. So it says in a particular place in the New Testament about how Jesus actually spit on his hand, gathered up some dust, spit on his hand, and then put it on the man's eyes, told the man to go wash it off. And when he did, he was able to see. He was a blind man. So I believe that God used his saliva to form man from the dust of the earth. Now, they seem gruesome. I don't know. We're talking about things that are just not comprehensible. Okay, but I believe over the theory that the dirt somehow came to life and made itself over billions of years. I would much rather believe that God formed man out of the dust of the earth than to believe that the dust of the earth just made a man by itself without a cause for no reason. That's just illogical. So God makes man from the dirt, uh, and that's actually can be harmonized with science, because the plants require the dirt to be able to grow, and then eventually the cows and stuff, they eat the plants, right, and then we eat the cows. So the foundation of that is dirt, and we are biologically related to plants. There's a lot of similarities in the DNA because of that fact. We need to be able to. We live in the same environment, so we're all going to feed off the same essential ingredients, and that's going to be found in all life. So this doesn't mean that we, have like a common ancestor. It means that we have a common designer who's using the same materials for different purposes. So God put man in the Garden of Eden. The whole world is a complete paradise. There's billions of plants and animals and everything all over the world. And then he separates, this little desert, okay, or, it's probably not a desert full of fertile soil, but definitely no greenery on it. It's just a garden, okay, that he separates from the rest of the world, which is a complete tropical paradise, puts a garden in it, and then puts the man in the garden, I believe, because the Bible is describing a creation here in Genesis 2. And the reason for that is because we're seeing God create everything a second time with Adam there as an eyewitness. So he creates Adam as the last thing that he created, and then he recreates like animals and plants in his sight so that Adam can have a firsthand, like an eyewitness account of God creating everything, which is what Eve didn't have. And that's why Satan uh, chose to tempt Eve, because she was susceptible, having not been an eyewitness of God creating everything. She was just trusting in Adam. And we just need to put our faith in Jesus, even though we haven't physically seen God. Jesus seen God, he told us, so we need to believe that. The tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil were placed in this garden, and it was commanded Adam they should not eat of that tree. And then, of course, he makes Eve, which we'll get into that. He said to Adam, though, that in the day that you eat of it, you are going to die. Now, of course, we know that he ended up eating it and he didn't die. So what does that mean? Well, it means that he fell from glory. He's a perfect individual, but he didn't have and he had free will, but he hadn't executed that free will yet for something bad. And so once he did that, you know, that made him a free agent. And now he's responsible for his sin. And once you become responsible for your sin, you're aware of your sin, you have to have a means to having it forgiven. So Adam had to be saved past that point. I believe he probably was saved, okay, which is to believe in the, the first prophecy of Jesus Christ was right there. After he sinned, it said that the seed of the woman would be at enmity with the seed of Satan, and that the seed of the woman would one day crush the head of the serpent. And that is symbolic. It's talking about how the curse of sin would be reversed and the world would be restored back to Garden of Eden style conditions. So what happens, is God prolongs his judgment upon Adam. So he doesn't die that day, but he still falls from glory. He still becomes responsible from sin. He inherits a sin nature at that point, and now he has to be saved. So he died spiritually, theologians would say, not physically. So God caused him to die spiritually, prolongs his physical death to nearly 1,000 years later, and then prolongs the judgment upon his children, for this wicked thing that he did, bringing the sin nature upon everybody. He prolongs that judgment until the global flood, which would be nearly 2,000 years later, where he would curse the ground, as he said. I don't believe that happened until the flood. I don't think Adam would have had problems growing stuff, or any of his children, or anybody. They're in a tropical paradise. No reason to believe that. So the curse is prophetic, of a judgment that God would bring upon the ground. But it wouldn't necessarily be at that time. Be much later, the flood that would completely rearrange the crust of the earth, and so creating icelands and deserts, etc. Genesis 2, verse 18 through 25. What the man was alone without help, and this is the deficiency that God seen in man. After creating him, he sees that there's something missing. Adam, obviously, he would have seen that there's something missing because he's looking at all these animals, he's naming them, and after he named them, there's something missing at the end of it, which is that everything has a partner that's a male and it's a female, and he doesn't. So he's thinking, where's my partner? And so God gives him a task while he takes his lower rib out of him and then forms a woman out of it. And this task that he gives Adam, can you guess it? Gives Adam a task before he creates Eve. What was that task? It's to sleep. Yes, he told Adam, take a little snooze. And so Adam took his little nap and then woke up, and Eve had been created. It says that the Lord brought her to him. So kind of like the father hands his daughter off to marry. It's kind of what God did here. He probably was walking Eve down the aisle, holding her hand. He gave her to Adam, who he entrusted her to, and he actually wrecked it. He let her eat off that tree. He let her sit there and talk to the devil himself and wouldn't do anything about it. It said that he stood there with her in the garden while that was happening. That's what the Bible says. That's how the story reads, that he was standing there with her. So God uses his lower rib to make the woman, and that's actually the only bone in the human body that will actually grow back, kind of like a lizard's tail. It will grow back if you remove it, the lower rib. Would almost think that God knew what he was doing on that one. A man and a woman are created to spend their whole lives together. As friends, they're supposed to be partners. They're supposed to be producing children. This is the plan. This is how we're going to be the happiest. And that's, you get on God's program, you're going to be the happiest. And it said that the two would be one flesh. So each time that you come together with a woman, you know, they're going to take a piece of you in that process. And if you leave that woman, a piece of you goes with it. And that will take an emotional toll, later. It's going to take away the opportunity that you have. So you need to have a family. You need to stay together until death do us part, just like the oath says. And then you'll have a happy life. That's what I believe. I am still single right now, but I believe that that is God's plan for my life eventually. So I want to get on that plan. I want to get with a woman, get married, die married, and have as many children as possible, so that the plan of God for anybody's life, male or female, is to just obviously there's minor exceptions, people that single, they can't marry for some reason. Generally people are supposed to get married, have children, and that's God's plan for our lives. So become independent, become partners with somebody, and then never separate from that. And that's what the Bible commands. The two would become one flesh, and so God never intended for us to separate. Even the Pharisees had asked Jesus one time, can you divorce your wife for any cause? And he responded to them by saying, it's for the hardness of your hearts that Moses wrote a bill of divorcement for you to, give to each other to sign if you wanted to actually divorce yourself from your wife. There could be a bill of divorcement and no judgment of God would come upon you if you do that bill of divorcement. However, the bill of divorcement was, you couldn't just write it for any cause or stipulations, like cheating. But, they were asking him, is it lawful, to just divorce for any cause? And he said, if it, except for the cause of fornication, God's plan is that for one man and one woman to be together and stick together for life. No polygamy, no taking other wives, just one man, one woman for life. And so from the beginning of the creation, it wasn't so that man would separate from his wife. God's original plan is for them to stay together forever. It's just when sin is added to the equation where the dangers of separation can get involved, and then you end up having to write a bill of divorcement. So Jesus is against divorce. He doesn't like it. You shouldn't like it either. So that will conclude lesson number 1 on the doctrine of creation, and then lesson number 2 will be on sin. The text for that will be Genesis 3 through 5. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you there. God bless America. I'm out.